Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It reminds me of another quote that I couldn't find on my mobile phone, but it was from, I think, Samuel Adams, one of the founders of the US, where he said, in our generation, we have to deal with the drudgery and the politics and a lot of mess so that our children can be builders and engineers and scientists, so that their children can be artists and sculptors and musicians. So it's a very similar spirit. I think great to be with such kindred spirit today. I know many of you don't know me, so I'm going to ask someone that you all know to introduce what is AI.
It's a great thing to build a better world with artificial intelligence.
And wait.
人工智能正在改变世界。
So you thought only his granddaughter can speak Chinese. This is the result of deep neural net speech synthesis run over President Trump's voice and then re-synthesized, and it sounds almost human. And it's a perfect example of what deep learning can do. Deep learning is the big breakthrough over the last 10 years, and it is a technology that within one single domain with a huge amount of data, it can learn to make better decisions than people. But some key points are only single domain. So think of this as a prodigy that knows how to do one thing really, really well, but nothing else at all. So then that leads to all of our opportunities and troubles. So if you fed the system people's loan information, it'll decide better than people whether someone should get a loan or not. If you fed it Go games, it will play Go better than people. If you fed it pictures of MRI images of our lungs, of healthy and cancer patients, it will distinguish whether someone may have cancer on the lung and where the tumors are. So this is the capability of amazing technology that has been around for 10 years, started to show its real potential about 6 years ago, and that was when we got into investing in AI. Because I've been working on AI for 38 years, since I was a sophomore in school. Most of the things I built never worked. Even though they've been on Wall Street Journal, New York Times, there were times that people thought things worked, but it was all false alarm. But it was not until deep learning, invented by 3 North American scientists, that really broke everything open. And of course, there are a lot of technology around it. You may have heard of CNN, DNN, RNN, reinforcement learning, transfer learning. Those are all within the same, I think, family of technologies. And I'm going to refer to them as deep learning in this talk. And Sinovation Ventures, we noticed, since I was knowledgeable in AI, we noticed that big change in the about 6 years ago, when deep learning-based systems were beating everybody else. And we said, uh-oh, maybe AI is coming back again. Maybe real, maybe hype, don't know. So we invested in a couple of companies. Then they showed great results. Then we invested in a lot more companies, very quietly, so other VCs don't know our little secret. But of course, 2 years ago, our secret approach was shattered by AlphaGo, which defeated Lee Sedol and then Ke Jie. And certainly all of China knew, some of America noticed, and then the whole world became turned upside down with all the deep learning driven applications. And it was with respect, and it was because of our early work in VC, we're viewed as the top AI investor. And today I'll tell you why China has done so great in AI. I think some of our early investments, before it took off, made a contribution to AI really becoming in the implementation phase in China. But of course, the AlphaGo made a much bigger difference. And it was seeing the success of our investments, and many of them are starting to displace customer research, customer service representatives, loan officers, manufacturing workers in the assembly line, and restaurant workers and cashiers. I started to realize that there is also, for me, a social responsibility that people know this stuff is going to make a big difference in the future of work. This is generally agreed upon by a lot of people, but there are also people who are much more optimistic. So you will judge for yourself whether the future of work is a big issue or not. I think most people agree this is a challenge we have to face. So that's why the two topics, rise of China and the future of work. So this is the picture of how the deep learning will penetrate all of the applications that surround us. Because, as I said, it's a single domain, large amounts of data. Well, where do we have single domain, large amounts of data? Well, Amazon has it, Google has it, and Microsoft has it, and China's Tencent and Alibaba have it. They have so much data that it's not just data that's running by. It's not like crawling the web and getting data. It's data that is also labeled with the proper answer. So, for example, face recognition needs to be labeled with who's who. Otherwise, how do you train the deep learning system to distinguish Martin's face from Rob's face? You have to label them. But how does Amazon data get labeled? Well, every time we buy, it's a strong signal. At Google, every time we click, that's a strong signal. In Facebook, in the newsfeed, every time you click, that's a strong signal. And it will send you more of the same. And it will send, and how does it know the things you like? Well, it also considers all the people who might be like you. So it feeds all of the data into a giant network to determine what are things that you like, what are things you buy, what are the ads you click on, and it gives you more of the same. In some sense, this sort of recommendation engine is the most rudimentary, but also the most profitable, because these internet companies have so much data, more than anyone else in the world, and that data can be trained towards one objective function. So to give a little more detail on deep learning, you give it all the data and you ask it to do one thing. So it's one domain, one thing. Okay? Within the domain of face recognition, with all these 1 billion faces with their names, please learn for yourself how to minimize error rate on face recognition. Right? With all this data on Amazon sales clicks from all these data, from all these people, please figure out what this particular person might be most inclined to click on and maximize click rate. But if you don't want to maximize click rate, you can also maximize the person staying on your site. You can also maximize revenue. You can also maximize profit. And what you would display to the user would be different. Right? In the profit case, you would display your highest margin product that the person would click on with, let's say, 40%. But if you want to maximize revenue, you might display something the person would click with maybe 70% on. However, you make the revenue, but maybe you break even on that product. So it gives the human a very powerful knob of what you want to train the network to do. And for internet companies, it's very easy. It's generally click-throughs, minutes per session, revenue per session, revenue per user, profit per user, etc. So it almost just go direct, and deep learning's basically created a cash printing machine for the internet companies. And you turn the dial, more ads dollars come out. You turn the dial, more sales come out, more and so on. And that's why Google, Facebook are paying $1 million a year to very good AI researchers. That kind of salary has only happened in your field, but now high tech also. So that's the internet AI, and China has Tencent and Alibaba. The next layer is, well, who else can use AI? And many of you are here for that reason. Businesses can also use AI if they have a large repository of data. Many businesses view storing data, archival data, as a burden, as a cost center. So when I visit many of the businesses, the person sitting in the corner managing the data center is usually a poor person to whom the CEO views as, you cost me so much money. Why do these computers and disks cost so much money? And either that person or the CEO needs to realize now, that person is sitting on a gold mine. And many of you may need to have a different person with a different mindset. Both the CEO and the person running that need to have a different mindset, because maybe that data is gold mine. But before it can become a gold mine, you have to put it in structured data warehouse so that you can apply AI to it. Right? Internet data is much easier than business data. So an example is if you're a bank and you've stored all the customer transactions over the years, to you it's just a painful archive you have to do for legal and customer reasons. But now That archive can be trained into doing all kinds of things. You can guess if a customer transaction was a fraudulent one, a credit card. You can determine if the person is trustworthy and going to default on the loan or not. You can decide what's the proper asset allocation given this person's net worth. And you can actually estimate the person's net worth, not only based on his banking transactions, but other public data that you can choose to get. So, and if you're afraid to do all that because that's your core business function, you're afraid of messing up your bank function, well, the very least you can do is when you send out those marketing emails, EDMs, you can decide what's the right message to entice each customer to click open the email and then maybe click on the link about the product you're trying to trick them, sell to them, right? So, so there's a whole range of things that you can do. And this can go on for many, many things. Maybe before I move on to the next range, I'll just give you an example because many are in the finance domain about the magic of deep learning. Because if you're from a bank and you're thinking about a loan, you're typically thinking about an application, which has maybe 50 fields they fill out, and then a person scans it using some kind of trained template, script, or experience, decides to approve the loan or not, then the supervisor signs, then the loan goes. However, this is not at all how a deep learning system would work. Let me describe a deep learning system. We have invested in a company that built an app called Smart Finance, only available in China, described in my book, that actually is in wave 1. Here's an app you download, and then like a loan application form, it asks you a few questions, many fewer than 50. You just have to say your name, address, income, and Social Security, equivalent of Social Security ID. Take a selfie, and that's it. And then it asks you, may I upload data from your phone? Before you get all alarmed, this data is roughly at the same level as Facebook or YouTube is allowed to take according to Android standards or iOS standards. Then it sucks up all the data, and then 1 second later, you get the money. So if you're from a bank again, think again about the future of your loan business. This is what's going to disrupt you. But does that system work better than the human? I mean, your human in the bank has 30 years of experience of approving loans and a certain default rate. But think about how this app works. Anybody can apply for it. So would you be willing to go outside this building, the first 1,000 people you meet, give them $1,000 each, and then hope they pay you back? What would the default rate be like if you did that? Suppose they gave you genuine name, address, and everything. But even then, it's probably very high, right? Default rate for this app is 3%. And the interest rate is 36%, maximum allowed by the government. And you can do your math and see how profitable this company is. So, so how does it do the magic? Well, all the things on the phone are features fed into deep learning. You might not think they matter, but they do. The type of phone you have makes a big difference. Obviously, your income makes the biggest difference. Your address, zip code makes a significant difference. But the type of phone you have makes a big difference. Types of apps you've installed makes a difference. If you have some gambling apps or games apps versus Quora, that makes a big difference. Have Quora, that'd be good for you. Also the type of plan you have, right? I mean, if you have a very high-end plan or a low-end, those are all things that are sucked up and used. But there's some really amazing things like your battery level. Does that matter? It does. How can that possibly matter? I have no idea. I mean, we could guess that maybe people who tend to run out of batteries tend to be less trustworthy and therefore don't pay back on their loans. I have no idea. But there are 3,000 features, some of which are mysterious to us as to why they're included. But the system doesn't bet on your battery level. It's one of those very, 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 very minor features, but 3,000 of them, 3,000 features, some major, some minor, magically blended together to decide if you get the loan. If the feature is not deleted by deep learning, then it's contributing some value. Maybe infinitesimal value, but it didn't delete battery level. There are other things like the date of the month. If it's right before, I'm guessing, because explainable AI is hard, so I'm guessing that if you are borrowing before payday, a week before payday, that's pretty reasonable. A day after your payday, not very reasonable, because you just got paid. Well, how does it know your payday? Well, it knows your name, address, zip code, so it can guess based on your phone what kind of a job you might have and what days of the week, what days of the month you might get paid. Of course, each guess might be wrong, but it's integrating 3,000 things, some of which are definite, some of which are probable, some of which are speculative, some of which are almost random but has slight correlation, and it puts it all together. And that's how we got the 3% default rate. So hopefully this example shows you the magic of AI and why it's difficult to have explainable AI. So if you had that 3,000 feature and someone were to approach and say, I want to know why I didn't get the loan, what would we do? That's why AI scientists are always confounded by people asking for explainable AI. Because AI is so smart, we have to dumb it down to our level to explain, right? Because we can only explain, if then else, because this and that. But actually there are 3,000 things. Of course, since people will request, I think we can pick the 3 most prominent features that contributed to the rejection of your loan and list them for you. But actually the fact is much more complex than that. So anyway, I hope that example is helpful to you on understanding the power of deep learning. So going beyond that, there's wave 3, which is adding eyes and ears, putting cameras and microphones in rooms that can observe and hear and do things that you couldn't do before. So what are the things it can do? Well, Amazon Echo listens to you and knows what you said, knows how you said it, knows the background noise, whatever that use is, that's fed to Amazon. At the airport, there are these cameras that check for faces of potential terrorists and criminals, and they've captured all of our faces, and that could be used for face recognition training. Because every time you walk through, you show them the passport, that's your label data. So they know who you are, so all the cameras that capture you, to the extent allowed by laws of different countries, train on those photos to say, okay, Rob is a good person, no, don't go after him. But that other person looks like this terrorist, go after him. And that's how, that's why a lot of the hijacking terrorism is reduced at the airports. And what else can it do? Amazon Go is another example. It can observe all the things you do. Online, we have cookies. They track us. They know what we browsed, what we picked up, what we clicked. Offline, in the retail store, you don't. End of the day, you have a pile of cash and some inventory gone. But if you had a camera that watched everyone, then essentially each person has a little cookie that you can track on what they picked up and what they looked at, what they frowned at, what they smiled at, what they bought, what they didn't buy. And that can help you how to update your inventory, what products not to put, and how to place your items on the shelf, and also predicting the kind of sales you might have. Maybe one person comes in to buy 50 beers every Friday because they have a party. Well, then you know, maybe it's every other Friday, but once you start to track that, you start to know how to replenish your stock. But of course, one step further is you can track the action of these users. They might take something, put it in the basket, even put it in their briefcase or pocket or purse, and you can track all that, and you don't have to, shoplifting is gone because put it in your pocket, you're charged. So the future of stores will track all your action, and your action can be turned into, for example, a purchase. So that's all the power of perception AI, the ability to see and hear and use that to drive direct and indirect decisions. And then wave 4 is autonomous AI. That is robotics and autonomous vehicles. So robotics, we believe, will start from manufacturing because they're the ones who can afford the most expensive, most high precision items, for things like inspection on the assembly line, into building simple things that don't change a lot. A lot of people think, well, iPhone, Foxconn, that's the perfect example. You can make those iPhones by robots, get rid of the many people who built them. Actually not, because you know how often iPhones are updated. So once you train a system, you throw it away because the next system comes along. So it's actually suitable for things that don't change a whole lot. And the cost is very high in the beginning, so you always have to find the early adopters. For example, we invested in a dishwashing robot. It's a phenomenal product. It's not a humanoid robot. It's a big machine. You just throw everything in, all the leftovers, junk and napkins and everything in, and recycle comes out, plates come out, everything comes out clean, sanitized, and beautiful, no spots. Who would want one? Everybody, right? Okay, so after this talk, I will be collecting orders. It's $300,000 each. Anybody still want it? Well, restaurants too. If you have a restaurant, you've got 10 dishwashers. In a year and a half, it pays for itself, doesn't it? Then that's how it gets to volume. Next year, the same version can be sold for $150,000, and then in 5 or 8 years, you can have your home $2,000 dishwashing robot. So this will happen. And then an autonomous vehicle, that's going to be phenomenal because it's not the button on your car. We're no longer going to be buying cars. I mean, this is going forward 15 years or so, but we'll not buy cars anymore. Car is the worst investment we've made. 96% idle, 4% driving. Why not have Uber just take us everywhere? If the Uber could arrive in 30 seconds, would you still want a car and park? Well, Uber can arrive in 30 seconds if we all stop owning cars and give them the whole road. And there will be less congestion, less pollution. It'll be safer because autonomous driving, like all AI, gets better with more data collected. It trains smarter AI. And then eventually the cars will be so good they can talk to each other like an IoT network, and they can go past each other, miss each other by one inch, right? It'll be very scary for us as passengers. And what's even scarier is us as human drivers. We won't be allowed to drive anymore, just like we can't ride horses onto interstate highways, right? But for those of you who love driving, well, enjoy it now while you can. And then, but not to worry, even the day we're not allowed to drive, just like there's still farms for riding horses, there will be something for driving cars. So hopefully I've demonstrated the power of this set of technologies. This is not projecting a human-level AI. This is merely projecting current deep learning technologies with predictable improvements in engineering and tailoring to applications, and a small number of engineering discoveries and improvements that gradually makes it better. Each of these waves will surely create 5 to 10% value to our GDP. And each of these waves will surely displace 5 to 10% of our workers. So it's very much a double-edged sword. So AI requires a lot of data and very accurate tagging, single domain, and only single domain. That's important because then it can be human-like. That's why it can't be human-like. And a lot of computation power and some AI experts. So if you want to implement AI in your company, you will need to hire some AI experts. The really good news is you no longer need a super fancy $1 million, H-index 50 level of super AI expert. You just have to find maybe someone with 2-3 years of experience as an AI engineer, perhaps even without a PhD, but who knows how to play with various open source, plug them in to show you how it works, or outsource it to a company that has that capability. This has changed dramatically. AI has become a lot easier to do. However, you cannot just say, here's an IT team, go do AI. That would be too much. So somewhere between, existing IT team do AI, spend $1 million to hire a super expert, it's somewhere in between. You can probably find someone for a normal salary, slightly higher than normal salary, who has AI engineering experience, who knows how to hook up open source. For most of your wave 1, wave 2 applications, that's probably sufficient. Or you can find a company that is a consulting company or engineering company that has that skill set. Okay, so US and China. I think most of you are probably not that much into US versus China, but I will want to tell you that US appears to be way ahead of China, but China is actually behind in research, but ahead in implementation. And I'll tell you why. All the top researchers are Americans and Canadians, and all technologies of all the past have always revolved around the US, in particular the Silicon Valley. So I think US feels entitled to dominating the world again with AI, with such prowess that we showed on the previous slide. But there has been a big change in the last 10 years. China, this is pre-AI, 10 years ago, proved that it has a huge market that drew a lot of money and smart VCs who trained and helped very tenacious entrepreneurs who built great companies that had increasingly better products that further increased the market. So this is kind of wave one, okay? Wave one without the AI. That happened in the last 10 years. So much so that China is a much bigger market. 10 years ago, China internet market was about 1/20th of US value. Today, it's about 1-to-1. So that gives you an idea how fast that's risen. And US has gone up a lot, right? If you bought Google when it went IPO, you'd be what, 4x? You've made 4x, but China is 4x times 20x. So while if we view Google as an index for US internet growth, 4x in 10 years or something like that, more than 10, what was it, 15 years? 4x in 15 years, China would have been another 20 or 30x on top of that for the 15 years. So phenomenal growth because of this cycling effect. And the VCs just keep getting smarter, the entrepreneurs get more experience, the products get better. When products get better, lower tier cities and younger people and poorer people and older people start getting online. China has just way too many people that more of them are getting online every year. And they have different characteristics that allow different kind of products to target them. If you've seen the IPO called Pinduoduo, PDD, it's a crazy company, 3 years, $25 billion in valuation. It's exactly targeting the last 200 million people who got on the internet. The products, no one I know uses the product, but it's can you imagine? I probably know 5,000 people on I have 5,000 friends on my WeChat. So I sort of met and scanned and met, and it's like Facebook friends. I know 5,000 people, 0 of them use this product, and the company is worth $25 billion. So there you go. So China is a very tiered market, very separate market. So what has happened is that while China in the beginning imitated and copycatted American products, now it has split off its own approach to doing entrepreneurship because the market is just way too large. The entrepreneurs are too hungry and eager for success. China has developed its own model for entrepreneurship. I'll give you one quick example. You guys all use Yelp, right? Wonderful product, helps us find better restaurants. The China Yelp is a company called Meituan. And what does it do? It disrupts the way people eat. So the Chinese entrepreneurs dares to think really big. Well, how does it disrupt that? It delivers the food to your home. You can say, well, we have Grubhub. Well, the difference is Meituan found out if they want to deliver to most of Chinese homes, let's say 500 million Chinese homes, what would it take for those users to stop eating out or maybe eat out half as much? What would it take for those people to cook half as much and rely on takeout? That sounds pretty hard. What would it take you? Well, first, you would have to be able to order from like 500 restaurants. Otherwise, no one wants to eat the same food every day. Second, those 500 restaurants have to deliver to my home within 30 minutes, including cooking time. Now we're getting almost impossible here. You can imagine the New York traffic, but Beijing traffic is worse, right? So, and then what are they willing to pay for delivery? 70 cents. So now it appears to be a problem, and entrepreneurs should say, okay, I give up. But in China, people don't give up. So the CEO of Meituan said, we're going to solve this problem. We're going to find high-tech and low-tech solutions, put it all together, and do the impossible. So what is the solution? Well, it includes low-tech solutions like, well, how do you find absolute minimum wage people to do this job? Because otherwise you can't get to 70 cents. Well, that's really hard. You're taking these are people who can't get a job at a Foxconn factory, right? Can't get a job at an Uber driver. Probably can't get a job at McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken. So yet you're going to find them, hire them, maybe from the village, I don't know, and then teach them manners, courtesy, and how to provide customer satisfaction that's worthy of your brand. So that's a really almost impossible task, but they did it. And of course, you have to have a system of user feedback and then fire those who offend customers, etc. So that's number one. Number two, well, what's the vehicle? Well, not Uber Eats. Uber Eats it alone would cost too much gas. The gasoline would be more than 70 cents. So it's got to be electrical mopeds, and very cheap ones at that. Okay? Well, then electrical mopeds, they run out of battery. What do you do? Well, build battery recharging stations. Oh, but you can't recharge because 30 minutes. Okay, then battery replacement stations. So the algorithm programs basically says, okay, who will deliver these 10 boxes for $2. Nobody? Okay, $3. It's like a reverse bidding process. Eventually, it's like the reverse Uber search, right? Search price. So somebody says, okay, I'll deliver them. So you get the 10 boxes, and then the system knows your battery is half dead, half depleted, but enough to deliver this thing. So they say, okay, deliver the 5 of the 10 boxes, go to the station, exchange your battery for a new one, go deliver the next 5 boxes. Okay, here's $2.50. So imagine the work it takes to build that kind of network. But when you build it, what happens? Well, first, you're going to have tons of revenue. You're going to have 25 million orders a day. That's what they have. Secondly, you'll be worth $50 billion company, which they are. And thirdly, you will have erected such a high wall or such a long, deep moat that your competitor cannot copycat that. So that's what happens when you have a copycat originated economy, is that you assume whatever you do, someone's going to copy. And the only way you can win in your business is make an uncopyable business model. And that makes you impregnable. And that, I think, is an approach that I can only cover very shallowly here, but I think will someday be studied by Harvard Business School as a parallel way to the Steve Jobs dent in the universe approach to doing entrepreneurship. So anyway, still haven't got into AI yet, but you can see how this is already relevant. Oh, one more thing. Speaking of Steve Jobs, one more thing is, so suppose, how does Meituan know it could achieve this goal? They don't. They just took a chance that I'm going for it. What if they fail? Obviously, they started with a much higher per delivery cost, maybe $2.70. And every month, they drive down a few pennies, right? So suppose the lowest, despite all this work, all they got to is $1.70 per delivery. Then what happens? Well, then at 25 million orders per day, they'd be bleeding $25 million a day, and they'd be out of business. So that is the risk that you take in order to build a business model that is impregnable. So that is just the Chinese way. I do think some Americans can consult and take some of these inspirations into their businesses, though probably not Silicon Valley ones. So as a result, Chinese systems have moved up on this graph, starting with copycats that can simply be described as the Google of China, Amazon of China, into companies that started with a US inspiration. I think Xiaomi is kind of inspired by Apple. WeChat is inspired by WhatsApp. Weibo inspired by Twitter. But in many of these cases, they now build better products than the American counterpart. Xiaomi not yet better than Apple, but all the other ones, many of the other ones have beaten the US product. And then moving on to the really Chinese innovation. This is where I can't even use the time today to describe to you what kind of companies they are here, because these are the companies that don't have a US correlate, so analogy. So just take my word, these companies are worth about $300 billion on this slide. And none of them are copied anything or inspired by anything in the US. Purely Chinese built innovation using the model I described. Assuming people will copy you, so make it impregnable. Each of them did it that way. And now there are people copying from China, not to China. So in the process, it has trained entrepreneurs who are incredibly tenacious and hardworking. A frequent word used in China is 996. That's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And that's usually considered a very good work-life balance, as many other startups are 997. And coming back to AI, you could see the relevance, right? Incredible speed in building up companies, great entrepreneurs, those are all great for AI implementation. And getting funding, well, there's lots of funding. China funds AI more than the US. Chinese stock market values Chinese companies more than American market values American companies that have similar products and similar revenues. And how much are these companies worth? This is Sinovation's top 5 AI companies. We've invested in 45. They're all alive. Many will still reach these levels, but to date, 5 have reached the unicorn $1 billion market cap status, and the total valuation is $21 billion. And this is just one VC. And there are many other VCs. These are just 5 unicorns, and there are at least 10 or 12 other unicorns. So the China AI market is just blossoming. And why did that happen? It's because 10 years ago or maybe 8 years ago, AI was in an early adoption phase where a super PhD with a big H index, lots of papers published, famous MIT professor, that's what everybody chased and wanted that person to build a technological platform looking for an application. That was the approach 8 years ago. DeepMind is a perfect example of that. But today, the typical AI company is, well, I want to solve this problem in whatever, retail, healthcare, and so on. And I'm a business-oriented CEO. And I know how to sell to businesses. And I'm going to hire or have a partner who's an AI engineer who would be my CTO. And then we're going to go build a company and get lots of enterprise sales. So it's actually driven by enterprise business people. And AI is an important component, but its ease of entry has dramatically changed from the research-driven type of companies. If every AI company had to be like DeepMind, then of course US will win, because US has 10 times as many AI superstars as China. But if it's more about application, entrepreneurship, tenacity, and execution and speed, then China will leap ahead. Furthermore, it's all about the data as well. If you look at any research paper, they'll more or less show a graph like this. We tried 4 different approaches and vary the amount of data, and here's the result. Well, what does the result say? It kind of doesn't matter what approach you use. The more the data, the better it works. So data makes all the difference in AI, and if AI is the new oil in AI, if data is the new oil, then China is the new Saudi Arabia, with a lot more data, more people, more sensors, more food delivery, more mobile payment, more shared bicycle rides, more data and more data per user. So that makes founding a company much more likely to succeed. This is not to say every company is entitled to all the data, nor is it to say the government is entitled to all the data. Many Americans confuse about the freewheeling sharing of data. That is not the case. If you want to build a company, well, you make your own data. No one's going to give you the data. Give or selling data from one company to another for users is illegal, and the punishment is actually several years in jail. So that notion is not correct. But people come up with their ways to build data. If I want to sell AI to a bank, well, the bank has its own data, right? And I can take some internet data and intersect that with the bank's data. So it's not at all the case that data comes for free, but it is the case that there are lots of data out there for you to get when you build the apparatus to collect the data. So an example is mobile payment. If any of you are going to China, please be warned now that there's no cash. Not only are all the stores pretty much preferring and taking mobile payment, which you don't have. Credit cards are getting less and less accepted, and even a farmer's market, you're scanning to pay. Even beggars are not taking cash. They're holding up a sign that says, "Scam me." I'm hungry, scam me. And even robbers are not robbing stores anymore because there's no cash to take. So this is a dramatic big jump in China. It has a lot of effects. One effect is that it creates lots of data for AI. There are many other effects, such as turning a savings economy to a spending economy, such as making entrepreneurship much easier because you can monetize even when you don't have 1 million users. And it's actually making the economy more efficient because your credit cards in America roughly takes a 2% toll, 2% tax on the entire economy, for which there's no real reason. So that these are some of the things. And also I think it illustrates the type of government policy. So getting to tech, so using the mobile payment as an example, this is a perfect example of techno-utilitarian policy. So don't read the slides yet. I'm going to talk to you about mobile payment and techno-utilitarian policy. So think about if I were to introduce a new company that's a software company, and I'm saying I'm going to replace credit cards in the US, use me. I'm not connected to any credit cards. Connect me to directly to your bank account. It's wonderful. We'll connect everyone together. Let's say Facebook did that. Well, the next thing, so easy. Everyone's on Facebook, so we can pay each other. So all of a sudden, I don't need a pause. I don't need a bank. I don't need to apply for all these things. I don't need to pay for transaction costs. Merchants love it. Users love it. But before that gets adopted anywhere, well, Visa and MasterCard are going to start lobbying. No, don't do that. Facebook, as a software company, it does not know how to manage financials. There will be risk and fraud and hacks, and this is dangerous. Please investigate, right? And banks will say, oh, I'm not sure that's a good idea. We and Visa and MasterCard have a trusting long-term relationship. Facebook, I'm not sure they can do this. And the government will take its time to figure out to what extent to allow for this disruptive technology. Well, what does the Chinese government do? Well, the Chinese banks and credit cards, they complain too, but the government basically said, hey, it's a new technology. Let's, in the Chinese wording, let the bullet fly. That means you fire something and just let it fly a while. If it doesn't hit anybody, take it to the next level. If it hits somebody, okay, regulate it. That is exactly what happens in China. That's why, and then it keeps working. Alibaba, Tencent, to their credit, did a phenomenal job and had lower fraudulent levels than other means. So the government says, okay, you win. And then they win. It's not favoritism, it's just it favors technology adoption and lets it have a chance and see if it proves worthy. There are other things that become regulated. P2P lending is now regulated. Cryptocurrency is outlawed. So certainly the government is not afraid to put the brakes on something. But the default is let's try it for a while, and that's called techno-utilitarian. I'm not arguing that's right for every country, but it's advantageous for technologies that want to get fast, disruptive adoption. The other thing is setting a tone. The Chinese State Council made an AI development plan. You've probably read more about the Manufacturing 2025, which I'm less familiar with, but the AI plan, I'll tell you, there's no funding behind it. It is basically a statement and sets the tone. And because central government is very strong, each local government and each bank is going to rethink, AI is important to the central government. What can I do that matters to me? See, these are smart bureaucrats. They're not just blindly implementing AI. A city with good schools will say, well, let's do some research lab. A city with manufacturing will say, can AI help manufacturing? A city with that's at a hub will figure out, can I modify my highways to embed sensors to make autonomous trucks and vehicles possible? So it's going to be depend. And then some cities will say, well, I'm a very poor city. This doesn't apply to me. I'm going to ignore it. That's all okay. So that's how the central plan works. It sets a tone. It is not as a top-down dictated $1 trillion money forced spent on Chinese companies to beat American companies. I think it's sometimes portrayed that way. It's certainly not the case in the AI plan. And then the last thing is infrastructure building, right? All the companies we funded, all 5 unicorns were privately funded throughout their entire sequence. They did not take government subsidies. Government sees when the market economy is working, they don't subsidize. However, what will they subsidize is infrastructure that private companies cannot afford. Rebuilding a highway, building a new city for autonomous vehicles, making the roads into 2 layers, 1 layer for pedestrians and pets, 1 layer on bicycles, and 1 layer for cars. Those are measures that will improve safety for autonomous vehicles. So where do China and US stand? China is currently probably a little bit behind the US if you consider the 4 waves. But in 5 years, it'll more or less catch up, except in business, where data warehouse is not something that's yet very strong in China. But I do want to point out, this is really not a zero-sum game. Everyone wants to see the slide, so I make it. But the reality is the Chinese VCs fund Chinese companies. They build products for Chinese customers. They don't touch the US market. They're not likely to ever get into the US market for the next, 15 years. Because China and US have become parallel universes that is very hard to cross. So despite all the media interest about when can Google go to China, will a Chinese AI company come and eat our lunch, it won't happen for a lot of reasons. And it's up beyond the scope of this talk, it's in the book, but actually gaining of a Chinese AI company is actually not at the loss of an American AI company because they have different customer sets. So all these things will help push AI forward. A great US-China engine, the 7 giants training people, lots of VCs with lots of money for AI, and AI platforms starting to emerge, reducing the bars of entry. And in terms of all this great stuff, PwC estimates about $16 trillion of GDP addition. McKinsey estimates a slightly smaller number by the year 2030. And also, there are still a lot of issues with respect to AI. Issues like privacy, we've heard a lot about that. Security, hacking AI is very different from hacking phones and PCs. You're hacking into a neural network. The numbers get tweaked. How does anybody know this? You can also hack the object being recognized. If I put a few dots on my face, I might be recognized as Martin. It's actually true. It's been demonstrated. You have to know which dots to put where to trick which algorithms. But it can be done. You don't even have to do Mission Impossible mask or anything. There are easy ways than that. So those things have to be, those holes have to be plugged. Because you see, when you train a system to optimize accuracy on normal faces, it was not trained on weird faces, right? With a red patch and a green patch. It can confuse the system. So researchers are working on it, but security is a big issue. When your autonomous vehicle is taken over by terrorists, it can become a weapon of mass destruction. So all these issues are brand new and challenging to us. And data can have a lot of bias, but if we train on lots of data, that could be solvable. I think monopolies will get another way to reinforce their monopolies. Monopolies used to be maintained by a resource dominance or brand or technology or high bar of entry. Now it can be further reinforced by AI. Because they have AI, they have lots of data, their product is better because of the virtuous cycle. If you're a competitor, you don't have the AI, you don't have the data, then even if you have the other issues covered, you might not ever be able to beat them. And the wealth inequality has been an issue in the US. You've seen here top 2% US people and bottom 90%. The income has crossed in the late 90s and continues to widen. AI will only exacerbate that. The example I gave earlier, Pinduoduo, is a CEO, a young engineer who used to work for me. In 3 years, he created $25 billion of value. He owns most of the company. He's become one of the 100 wealthiest people in the world, and he's widening this gap. Of course, he deserves all the success, but the widening gap is a social concern. And then what about the blue line? Well, that keeps going down and will go down further if jobs are displaced by AI. As I described to you, AI can do one single task extremely well. And if we think about it, for all of you in the room, you work on complex tasks. You're not likely to be challenged by AI. In fact, AI tools can make you stronger. But many of your employees, or your customers' employees, or many people out there in the world, how many people do a single task for a living? Or do 3 tasks, each of which is a single task? And how many of them do repetitive routine tasks? And those tasks are going to be in trouble as repetitive tasks get replaced, routine, optimizing tasks all replaced, even high-end jobs like radiologists. And in New York, a radiologist makes $450,000, but in 15 years, they will be replaced by AI. So some people are safe, we're okay, but that's not much consolation because we're too small a percentage of people. This displacement is happening throughout blue collar and throughout white collar. And it's happening on one-to-one displacement. For example, you can see there are robotic hamburger flippers that's replacing one robot per hamburger flipper. There are cashier machines that automatically check out in pastry shop. We funded that. The cost, $800 one time. So that displaces cashiers. And then on the left-hand side, you see a brand new fast food store that is purely robotic. A bowl of beef noodles, wonderful food for Chinese people, is $1.50. So that's really going to give McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken a run for its money, right? So even though McDonald's and KFC might not be using robotic chefs or cashiers, if the robotic stores, robotic fast food gain 50% share, well, Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's will have to do 50% layoffs. So these will come through one-to-one replacement as well as industry-wide disruption. So all these people out of jobs, very few jobs left, what to do? Well, the good news is there's not just the creativity jobs that are okay. There are also empathetic jobs that are okay, because there are many, many jobs in our society that are left unfilled or can be expanded. These are jobs that require human interaction because a robot and AI is fake. it cannot emulate emotion. When I told you about training on a single function, those are objective functions that are either right or wrong, good or bad. So the person either defaulted or didn't. The face is either Martin's or Rob's. There's not an ambiguity in there, so they can be trained very perfectly on objective, correct labeling. So how do you train an AI? This person is angry. Here's how you deal with angry people. This person needs love, and how do you show love to the person? Well, that is something that's very abstract, and it's maybe personalized and different in each case. And even if AI could fake it to some extent, it will also screw up badly when it screws up. We've all seen Microsoft Tay put on Twitter for a day and started cursing and making racial remarks, and Microsoft had to take it off. Here's another special thing about AI is when you optimize on something, it does such a good job optimizing, if it doesn't care when it fails. It doesn't have a penalty function, right? Imagine if your spouse was 90% compassionate, 10% neutral. You're probably perfectly fine with that. But if your spouse was 90% compassionate, 10% just downright nasty. And that's what AI would be, even if we could train it, right? And people just won't accept it. So those jobs, I think, are safe. But are there enough of them? But first, let's see if we create a x-axis, which is about creativity on the right-hand side, and the y-axis, which is about compassion and empathy and human touch on the y-axis. I know everyone laughs at CEO at the upper right-hand side, but a CEO must have very strong people skills to get people to stick with him or her. Compassion may not be quite the right term, but it's some combination of creating trust and loyalty and willingness to follow, and people skills and communication skills, and empathy and compassion. So the lower left jobs are in trouble, but there are a bunch of other jobs on the upper left that can be much greater. Those jobs include teachers, beauty consultant, wedding planner, nurses, nannies, tour guides, social workers, psychologists, and so on. So there are plenty of jobs there. We can possibly make a shift from the bottom left to the upper left. Also, there are many jobs that are unpaid today or underpaid today, such as elderly caretakers, unpaid like homeschool teachers. We could imagine the jobs of teachers and doctors becoming totally different, becoming more personalized, more warmth, more mentoring, more caring, and less analytical. We can imagine a doctor relying on AI to do the diagnosis, but the doctor does the person-to-person touch, the home visits, the teasing out all the symptoms, hearing the patient vent, and helping the patient gain confidence, and so on. And that will then be an opportunity to train a lot more doctors with a lot less time per doctor. And that can change the employment picture. So if we think about this as a quadrant, 4 quadrants, the lower left-hand side are inevitably going to be displaced by AI. The lower right-hand side will be creative jobs like scientists, columnists, artists. They can use AI as a tool to amplify their creativity. The upper left will be AI analysis, like the doctor example I gave, and the doctor provides the human warmth. And then upper right will be where humans shine, with AI helping a little bit. So that's a more complex picture than many others have portrayed AI as a pure displacement engine or purely AI-human symbiosis. Both actually exist depending on the type of job that you have. So I'll skip this, and then AI is really just electricity that's going to be fueled by a lot of people who are willing to share. So I think if we all come up with ideas, I think that picture I showed with the blueprint for human AI symbiosis, it may not be the perfect picture. There may be lots of ideas. I think we should all come up with ideas to help governments, corporations, and individuals move along towards this set of inevitable job issues that will need to be solved. The good news is that AI will generate a lot of wealth, which should be able to fund this kind of transitions. So this talk has been about the next 20 years, where we have opportunities and challenges. But I'm convinced if we look at the next 50 years and look back, we will see that actually AI is serendipity. That if you're religious and believe we have a maker, or if you're not, then it's our collective self-consciousness. I think it kind of got tired of us. We continue to think routine jobs are okay if we make more money. But actually, and we just don't improve and see that there are better things in life. So our maker probably got upset and threw AI at us and just said, okay, you can't get out of this routine stuff. Okay, I'm going to give you a technology that replaces all routine jobs. That will force us to think what it is that makes us human. And also, I think if you worry about AI, remember, AI is just our tool. We are the only ones who possess free will. And it will be our decision, our free will, and our destiny to control AI and write the ending to the story of us and AI. Thank you.